Hello there everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now today's character that we're going to be talking about is one that I have a very personal affinity for. I absolutely adore this character, as I do with many of the characters from Final Fantasy V. And I know she's a pretty popular one for a lot of people out there as well because it's Faris. And not only are we going to be talking about Faris, but we're going to be talking about Dimensions End Transcendance Tier 2. As there's lots of information that comes with these DE tiers, there's a lot of things to digest, so we're going to go through all of it and see which characters are worth taking to each of these tiers. So if that's all stuff that you would like to know more about, then of course as always stay tuned and keep on watching. Couple of things before we get started. Of course, don't forget to check out all of my social media links in the description box below: Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Patreon, etc. And before we continue with anything else, I do have this lovely painting that the entries have all ended for, and I have a winner, and I'm very pleased to announce that Alexander Schneider from Germany is the winner of the Alexander hand-painted canvas just here. So that is going to be going out to you in Germany very, very shortly. Thank you ever so much to everybody that participated in the contest. I absolutely loved making this painting, and I really hope that I can find the time to make more of them, because it's something that I'm very passionate about. Like, anyone who knows me knows I love my painting, knows I love my makeup, knows I love anything artistic, so any excuse that I can bring joy to somebody when it comes to artwork, I will happily do. So thank you so much for your entries into that. And then with regards to Twitch, I will be pulling for Faris on Monday, which is also the community stream as well, but I'm not actually going to do Dimensions End Transcendance until the following day, because this week coming up is my birthday week. So what I've got is I have a birthday subathon planned for the night before my birthday, although my COVID vaccine is on Monday, so hopefully it doesn't knock me out for too much of a loop, where any donations, any subs, anything like that will extend the length of the stream so that hopefully it ticks over into my birthday so that you guys can be there and celebrate the very second that I turn 33. Like all together, and that would be really fun. So thank you very much. If you would like to pop along for that, then definitely hit the follow button on Twitch, and it would be great to have you. Lots going on this week. Of course, don't forget to check out all of the other content creators out there for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia and all of the resources that I use. And of course, we can't forget, of course, about Patreon and the fact that I shout out one of my patrons every time that I release a new video. And today that person's going to be Ludmeister, who is brand new to my Patreon. Thank you very, very much to all of my patrons for being a part of this. You allow me to continue doing what I do, and I cannot thank you all enough for it. So we only have the one character that we need to talk about today, which is obviously Faris, but with regards to the banner, it features obviously all of Faris's gear, LD, EX, everything else. It's the last chance, that, as far as we know, to get hold of Garland's Burst, so if you haven't got that already, then this is a great place for you to do that on. Although the EX characters that come up with her are Gilgamesh and Locke, which means, face facts, you're pulling here for Faris or for Garland's Burst. You ain't open for any consolation prizes. Now, Faris does actually get a rework, and it's not a small one either, although it doesn't massively benefit her basic skills, because if you've not used Faris before, her debuffs are her game. That is what she does. Like, so Water Whirl is a Brave HP attack after everything that now does splash damage where it didn't before, and it also, like, there's been an addition to the framed buff that she gets from it, which I'll get to in a moment. And this put up Enfeeblement up, which meant it was easier to grant debuffs, but that's such an archaic thing at this point because chance of debuff is just not really a thing anymore. Either you deal a debuff or you don't. But the Pirate Way is a buff that gives her all of her offensive stats and her speed up, and it now water enchants her as well, so all of her skills will now deal water damage. Other than that, very basic skill. Her second skill, Open Fire, as it's now known, it was once originally known as Cannon Fire, is a AoE Brave HP attack with split damage that inflicts a bunch of debuffs, and also it deals really harsh debuffs, actually, like really harsh ones, because it does attack down, defense down, poison, and all of them are very strong. Like, the attack and defense down are now 70% drops, which is very heavy. Not only that, but it's also a dispel. It dispels everything. It dispels all buffs on all enemies and then applies these horrible debuffs as well. But the problem with her basic skills is that their hit counts are very low. She doesn't really have any follow-ups on anything. Her HP plus isn't particularly good, but her EX and her LD are very strong, and her skills are good for the kind of the utility part of them all. Water Whirl, I think, could have been a little bit better, sadly. I don't think it does. It's a splash damage attack, but in terms of Brave Shaving, it's not great, but we'll get to Brave Shaving in a moment because her EX and LD have that bit covered. I just think that even one more hit would have been nice on this, but not only that, but she does actually get a rework to her C50 as well. So much like all the other FFI characters, you have to master a skill so that you get like stronger hit counts, like more potency, things like that. And it takes like the first skill use for you to get that, but after she's mastered a skill, her allies, not her, get initial bravery and max bravery up by 10%. I'm a little bit miffed that she doesn't get that, like, as well. I don't know why she doesn't. It seems like a very strange thing for her not to get. Especially considering that poison works off of initial bravery and it would have made that bit a little bit stronger. But, like I said, the power is not in her base skills. So we'll go over to her EX. So Thunderstorm is a AoE multiple elemental damage, so thunder, wind, and water, and she gets a special effect from this called Sildra's Care. Now, Sildra's Care comes in after you've EX plussed her and everything, so that you come in with it, you start with it, and after every enemy turn, the enemy takes damage from a 2-hit brave attack that batteries the party as well. Now, it's not the strongest battery in the world, like, it's not, but it's still helpful to go off of every turn that they take, and that's great. And then with Air Knife Plus, you start with the Pirate Way, so she starts Water Enchanted. You get Sildra's Care, so she gets all of that as well. And Thunderstorm is a 9-hit AoE Brave HP attack with 100% damage, so it's strong. Then we get to her LD. Now, her LD is very interesting. So Spellblade Swords Dance, after you've put LD balls and everything into it, is actually a triple HP dump. So it does 2 hit Brave HP, 4 hit Brave HP, 4 hit Brave HP, splash damage on the last one. You then get framed versions of 80% poison, 30% max brave down, and then you still get the 70% attack and defense down off of this, and they're all framed, which I know you're thinking, oh, that's a bit scary, like when pairing her up with the other debuffers. Bear in mind that in a couple of months' time, we're going to get an expanded, like spaces for, like, inventory, if you will, for debuffs so that you can have up to 8 rather than just 6. So this is actually very relevant to her. You also get a framed debuff called Charming Dance, which is lowers all resistances to thunder, wind, and water. It lowers the amount of bravery damage they deal by a percentage, which is very nice in combination with the attack and max brave down and the poison. And it sets their bravery to 0 any time their turn ends. So if you remember what her EX did, it then lowers their bravery to 0, and then they get 2-hit bravery attacks. So this means that they get broken and battery your party every time they act. And that's actually not something to sniff at all. It's a very strong combination of moves. Now, you only get 3 uses of this, after even after Power Stones, etc. However, looking at the 2 out of 3 bit here, so she doesn't consume a skill turn on the first turn, which is fantastic. So, like, you know, it means that you can get to the plus versions of one of her skills, probably open fire, much quicker than you would have done anything like beforehand. And when the battle starts, she comes in inflicting Charming Dance, the framed debuffs and all of that. This is very, very relevant, like very relevant, and I'll get to why in just a moment. It's actually all to do with her call ability. Like, her call ability, like, Faris at this point becomes one of the strongest call abilities that there is, and it all comes down to these delicious debuffs. The Charming Dance is really handy against enemies that like to gain bravery really quickly. The attack down in combination with the brave damage dealt down, it all adds up, and you don't actually have to have Faris in your party at all. Faris is still useful in your party. Having Dispel on command and those nasty debuffs to kind of replace them. Having the EX and LD, like, you're obviously only going to get that when you bring Faris along because you don't get the EX when you're using the call ability. Like, you can have a lot of safety, and having the water enchant in peril for self is really handy, particularly if you haven't managed to finish some of the abyss. Like, you know, I think it's on the day that Faris is released that sadly the time rewards go away. But if you're still struggling with that first abyss and don't have Mog, then you might want to go for Faris just for that. But she's just a very utility-based character. She's very odd, but she does what she does extremely well. Now, I'm actually going to talk about Faris' call abilities last, because I think it's the biggest focal point of Faris, and I will, like, preach her case in just a moment. But weirdly, considering she's a debuffing character, she actually gets the Unity Keystone for her armor, rather than the Tactics Keystone, which I'm kind of here for it. Like, I love Unity Keystone. We all love Unity Keystone. But to have it on a character like Faris is actually kind of peculiar and kind of weird, because it kind of leans into her EX and the battery that provides, rather than the debuffing that, well, the rest of her kit provides. But let's talk about these calls. Now, Open Fire is her regular call ability, which is brilliant. And because you get those framed debuffs from her entering play for 4 turns, including Charming Dance, you actually get this as she comes in. You can ignore the regular versions of the debuffs that you get from Open Fire and just focus on the fact that you still get the mass dispel off of it, which is really nice. And then you get a decent amount of you get crazy debuffs, honestly, like 70% attack and defense down. Yes, it's framed, so you have to be selective on who you use it with, but it's a lot. Like, it's a lot. So, like, having access to that is just really, really helpful. And then, not only that, but with Spellblade Sword Dance, you still get all of that again, and you still get the multiple Brave HP attack after it. If you're using a character like Lightning, who uses thunder damage, like, Faris' kit is all water, but she imperils 3 different elements. Bart's is wind damage based, so the fact that's because when he comes out, his imperil for wind is aura based and not an actual debuff. That'll go well with an attack like Faris's one, where you can take advantage of having that frame debuff while Bart's is available. And obviously with water, I mean, she does water damage, but there's actually quite a lot of water-based damage dealers. There's tons of thunder-based damage dealers. And because it's a framed debuff on top of all of these nasty other ones that you're getting, you then don't have to worry about the imperil on those characters. And even if you're not really taking advantage of that, Charming Dance still has that horrible thing where they lose all of their bravery after they act. Like, it's very powerful. Very, very powerful. I can't stress how good these call abilities are. And I know that a lot of people don't like pulling for characters based on their call abilities. I know they do, because I was told about it a lot when Jack came out. But the number of people that I have spoken to since then that have said, God, I wish I pulled for Jack, take it from me, this is a call you will use a lot. And like, Faris herself is very useful for Dimensions End Transcendance. There are a few other events that she's useful in. She's not the kind of character you're going to take through to every event in your main party. She's definitely one that you'll take a lot to with call abilities though. So now let's take a look at Dimensions End Transcendance number 2 itself. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of the crucibles individually, and I will then list as my sort of image on the right hand side here what team I plan on taking to each of these. Now it's important to remember that DE Transcendence is permanent content. So if you can't finish it right now, don't stress about it, because there will be characters that come out later that you can always come back to this particular event and then finish it later. The worst you'll miss out on is a couple of tickets from like limited missions, but at the end of the day you can still get like the burst tokens, you can still get the majority of the rewards from it if you don't want to finish it now. So first things first, let's go for the left crucible. So the left crucible requires a black crystal character, Garland, and you're coming up against the Commander Beast and Worker Beast. So this is like a boss monster that likes to summon ads, and this is quite a trend thing across. We've seen the Commander Beast loads and loads of times now. I think he was like Lion's event like years ago. But what you need to be aware of with this is that delay is the Lufenia Orb. So delay it. It's literally that simple. Garland will ruin this event. Absolutely devour it, because his damage is massive. His burst phase is insane. You have so much to go with on this. Like, honestly, he will ruin it single-handedly. Now, the enemies become very, very resistant to magic damage. So you can't get around this either using imperils, things like that. You have to actually do physical damage. Don't bring magic damage dealers to this. So don't, like Terra, characters like that, not so much with this one. So, but there's plenty of delay characters that aren't magic based, so characters like Aranea. Lightning is fantastic for this as well. You know, there's lots of characters like that. The enemies are immune to launch though, so don't go taking characters like Cloud, because you're kind of using them at half capacity. And I actually think Cloud is really good for the other side of this crucible anyway. But my personal plan for this is to bring Garland, Aranea, and Ignis. Now, if you don't have Ignis, you could literally bring along any support character, because Garland and Aranea should be able to tackle this by themselves. But you could bring any support character, like Ishtola even works. Like, looking at Tombury Troops guide as well with Transcendence 2, they actually suggest Ishtola because the enemy absorbs the element that she attacks with stone, because that means that they then gain bravery for you to then break them again with a different character, which I actually didn't think of beforehand, and that's actually a really good idea. But honestly, like, as long as you've got delay-based characters that are physical, the reason I'm bringing Ignis along is because he's a physical support-based character. Pinello is also very good in that particular slot. And, you know, one of the crystal characters that you've got is a black crystal character. Garland is just the best character that you can take for this. So now we'll talk about the right crucible. Now this one requires a blue crystal character and is up against the rampage machines, which are again an enemy that we've very commonly seen in the past, and they're very well known for putting up a very irritating buff that makes it so they take less HP damage, and they just buff themselves quite a lot to the point where you can't really hit one of them and you can only hit the other. And they're just kind of annoying for that, and that still applies here. So you're going to want to bring somebody that can kind of dispel those buffs. Now this particular mission is designed with Faris in mind, with Faris being a blue crystal character. She deals with the Lufenia Orb, and she obviously dispels buffs. Now the Lufenia Orb this time around is for elemental weakness damage. Now it only increases the turn count by 1, so realistically you're gonna want an Imperil Enchanter here. They're weak to fire, thunder, water and dark though, so they're weak to a lot of very common very common elements, particularly if you have access to Ignis, or Desh, or Cryol, or Lightning, or like there's loads of characters that you could take along to kind of deal with that. However, the team that I've decided to go with for this particular mission is actually burstless for a start, so I may change this around a little bit to see if I might fit a burst into it. But it has Aerith, Cryol, and Trey in it. Now, Aerith is actually an all-star for this particular Transcendance tier. She's really good here because she prevents the enemies from getting the buffs in the first place, and also increases your HP damage output, and then also is fantastic in the decisive battle at the end, and I'll obviously speak about why when we get to that. But I brought Cryol along because I also plan on using Cryol in the decisive battle here. Again, elemental weakness damage, no problem here. You've got the fact that you can keep yourself safe. It pairs up really well with Aerith, for Aerith bringing the auras like the debuff, or the debuff evasion, the buff evasion, all of that good stuff, and the HP healing as well. The burst healing is fantastic on Aerith, and Cryol complements that very well whilst also dealing with the Lufenia Orb at the same time. And then I've gone for Trey as well, and both Cryol and Trey are blue crystal characters here. And if you've got access to Trey, I think he's very strong here because after they buff themselves, they put up massive bravery buffs, so like 80k plus amounts of bravery that you have to break, otherwise they're going to start really, really hurting you. Trey kind of just gets you around that because he just goes, nope, instant break EX debuff. No worries about that anymore. And not only that, but because he's enchanted by Cryol, all that off-turn damage that he's going to be doing with his like raining arrows, dynamite arrows, his firewall, all of that stuff, it's all going to add up and make it so that the Lufenia Orb is just something you don't have to worry about. Because +1 turn is not a lot, even if you're dealing even if you're dealing damage with every turn, it's still going to tick down on their turn. So you have to be careful of that. Now, like I said, other than that, you just have to kind of make sure that you're staying on top of their brave gains. If you want to, you can bring a call like Arciella, who makes it so they can't gain bravery with her LD call. That's going to be really helpful for you. And other than that, you just need to be able to deal elemental weak damage as frequently as you physically can. Past that, it should be fine. And then finally we get to the decisive battle, which has 3 waves in it, each with a different Lufenia Orb. So the first fight here is going to be the metal drums, which were from Vane's, no, not Vane's event, they're from Caius's event. And basically what they do is they just HP attack you a lot. And if they break you, like many of the Yeti style enemies, they start getting faster and making it so they get really, really aggressive. And then they also have a recast attack, which means that they gain loads of bravery. You have to break them in that time, otherwise they will just kill you outright. And the Lufenia Orb for this particular fight is fire, thunder, water, or dark damage. So again, it's got Faris in mind here. But my personal plan is to take Garland, because damage, and it also deals with the second wave as well. Cryol, because that deals with this particular event. It also buffs Garland very, very heavily during his burst wave. And then Aerith, because burst healing is much more useful, I feel, in this fight than HP regen is, and we'll get to that in the third wave as to why that might be the case. Aerith also bolsters HP damage taken, makes it so the enemies can't buff themselves, makes it so you can't be debuffed. all that good stuff that Aerith is just generally good for, and she's just an absolute all-star in this Dimensions End Transcendance as far as I can tell. Now there's plenty of other characters you could bring here. It doesn't have to be Kryl, it doesn't have to be Aerith. You just want to make sure that you're able to heal, but able to heal when you are wanting to, and again I'll get to that in a moment, that you're going to want fire, thunder, water and dark damage. So if you've got Ignis, then he will work really well here as well, because he's obviously got the HP damage up instead of what Aerith could bring. And then somebody with delay. So whether that be Garland or Lightning or Aranea or even Emperor, like I've seen people have reported like seeing Emperor in the left wave, which is obviously harder because they resist magic damage, but you can use him here. Terra is also another one that you can use here as well, like that, you know, as long as you're navigating the other two, but Garland is by far the easiest out here. So then the second wave is the Necro Raven. Now the Necro Raven we've seen before again, and what he does is after he gets killed, he then resurrects himself and you have to kill him again. The difference with this version of the Necro Raven is that after he's reincarnated, if he gets a turn, he will recover up to 600,000 HP every single turn. So this phase is a damage race. The Lufenia Orb is delayed. So if you're taking Garland, Aranea, etc., great. But do not be afraid to necessarily use your burst or your summon, like preferably your burst, in the second portion of this fight, because honestly, like we're talking 10 to 20% of its health just every turn recovered. It's just going to nullify so much of your work, burn through so much of your skills. You do not want that to happen. So you want to boss this thing down as quickly as you physically can. The fight itself is easy. It's all about just DPS race. And this is why I've brought Kryl, Aerith, Garland. Garland is a monstrosity for damage. Hopefully, because he's delaying quite as frequently as he is anyway, and I plan to take calls, I plan to take Faris as a call here. I plan to take maybe Gabranth, something like that, like just anything that is going to make my fight faster in this particular fight, so I don't have to use the burst here, so I can save it for the third wave. Other than that, just hit the damn thing really, really hard. And then the final wave, which is a brand new enemy, the Fallen Parrots. Yes, you heard me correctly, Fallen Parrots. Their main gimmick is that after they go beyond the 80% HP mark and the 30% HP mark, they change colour. They go from black to white. Now, when they're white, and they stay white for 12 turns, and that includes player turns, so if you're delaying, obviously, that makes it a lot easier, or bursting, or summoning, which is why if you can save all of that for the third wave, then it's better to. While they are white-coloured, any healing you do hurts you instead, so you can't heal. And obviously, if you've got HP regen going through this, you're just gradually taking HP poison damage that you can't heal off while they're still white-coloured. However, if a character like Aerith, who has Healing Wind, which is a great bursty HP heal, you can kind of just wait it out and then just go, okay, now I'm ready, heal. Now, their Lufenia Orb is having 5 debuffs active on the enemy. Now, with a lot of the waves in this one, you actually get a bit of a head start because the Lufenia Orb doesn't appear until after the 80% HP mark. And this is why I've chosen to take Faris Call here. And I may end up taking either Caius, a Middeltelian, or Gabranth Call here just as a backup plan as well, because it means that I can use, certainly in the case of Gabranth, I can use his basic call to inflict that extra HP plus 10% damage on early, and then with this one I'll have access to the stronger ones just to make sure that they have those debuffs at all times. So having access to that, like you'll get the weakness damage from Kryl, you'll get the Seal Evil from Aerith, and then you still need at least 3 more. So I'm kind of wanting to take somebody like Faris, somebody like Gabranth, so that is constantly there. And then Burst, Summon, they're not going to get any turns, it's not going to wear off of them, I don't have to worry about the orb anymore. They don't actually have that much health, they have 4 million HP each, which actually isn't a huge amount comparatively to some Lufenia missions. So if you have managed to stay, managed to keep hold of your burst, your summon, etc., and you've just blitzed through them, that is a very possible thing. Like, to the point you can blitz through them well enough that you may not even need to worry about the Lufenia Orb at all. And they don't enrage after one of them dies either. So as long as you're careful, then you're fine. Just be very cautious of taking any HP regen characters, because that white-coloured, the aura that they put off after that then you just got to be very careful with that. If you put them under 50% HP, they change back again so that they can then change back again when they hit 30% HP. So you'll have a breather regardless. If you are taking HP regen, don't panic. You can still get through it with that, and if the HP poison can't kill you, it can only put you to 1 HP. So as long as you're making sure they don't get turned so they can just go snap their fingers and kill you, then you'll be fine. You can just wait it out and then heal it all back off. It's all a bit daunting, as many DE Transcendance tiers are, but it's not. It's all a case of having the right characters. And as I said at the beginning of this section, if you don't feel you do have the right characters, like any of the characters that I've mentioned here, or any other content creators have mentioned, then you can wait. There are other characters that will come out that will also work here. So now that we've discussed DE Transcendance, the only thing left to talk about really is whether you should be pulling for Faris. I am absolutely pulling for Faris. Like, I am of the opinion that a good call ability is worth pulling for, and I've not regretted any characters that I have pulled for based on their call abilities, which include Gabranth and like sometimes even Trey, Jack for obvious reasons, Hope. They are all characters I've pulled for primarily for their call abilities, and I have not regretted a single one. And Faris is arguably the strongest one out of the lot. She definitely is worth her investment. She pays her dividends, because the buffs that you get, debuffs that you get from her are insane. The actual call ability buff actually isn't bad either. You get so much out of her, and it becomes so much more important as time progresses. Lufenia Plus is very built around debuffs, from what I've seen. You have to think about it. Why would they increase the number of debuff slots but not the number of buff slots? If there are 8 debuff slots, you want to be making the most out of them, and Faris fills half of them with good abilities and debuffs just by standing, just by bringing her in for one turn. And then it's just very, very strong, and it gets used for many, many, many months. Even in JP to this day, it's still somewhat useful. Even after all of the burst pluses are coming out, people are still using Faris for that. That on its own, to me, is a worthwhile investment. Faris's base kit is a little bit lacking at this point. The bravery hits aren't good. The potencies are really quite poor, even after the weakness damage increase and stuff like that she gets from being water enchanted. You need a very, very strong support character to go with Faris if you are going to use her in your main party. That is not to say that she's useless in your main party. She absolutely isn't. The unique combination of her EX and her LD make it so that enemies are broken no matter what after every single one of their turns, or after every turn that you have the EX call up for. And her EX isn't particularly slow on the recast; it's actually pretty good. So as long as you can keep that up and the LD, because you start with the LD debuff as well, you only get 3 uses of it, but you still get to keep hold of the Charming Dance debuff for longer than you might think. The problem with using her in your main party is that debuff management can be a bit awkward. Her hit counts aren't that great. But she is definitely still usable. There are missions that I have seen her used in over the next couple of months. In fact, there are players that I've seen make Faris sagas from over on JP and that have used Faris for a long time. There's a lot of use for Faris if you go looking for it. Is she the best character in your main party? No, probably not. Is she one of the best call abilities that make it so that her investment is well worth the while? God, yes. And then finally, it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to make your voice heard and let everyone know whether you would or wouldn't pull on any given banner and why. Now, a massive thank you, of course, goes out to all of my patrons for their votes and their comments, and if you would like to be a part of Would You Pull, as well as other benefits like the title card I showed earlier, and being part of voice chats, having behind-the-scenes footage, all kinds of other things, then perhaps, again, you would like to click on the Patreon link down below. But this banner, with the Would You Pull, has actually surprised me quite a lot, because I didn't think that people were quite as excited for Faris as I was. But 48.8% of people said that they were going to use gems. 51.2% of people said they were going to use 100 or more tickets. That's it. No no's, no less than 100 tickets. People are going all in on this banner. Now, I must confess, I'm actually only using tickets on this banner, despite the fact that I am very excited for Faris. The reason being is because I am actually saving my gems for late June, where we should be getting Bartz's batch. Now, Bartz's batch has 3 banners that I want to spend gems on, and if I end up having a pity, because every time I spend gems I end up having a pity, and I have to go through Tifa, Galoof and Bartz himself, I don't really want to be spending gems here as well. But we do have Divine Alexander coming, hopefully, in the near future. Hopefully we'll learn more about this on Monday with the community stream, where we should get a buttload of resources as well for that. But I kind of want to spend tickets on Gold Bez's banner as well. So hopefully I can get this with tickets. Now, let's go into some of the comments. So, Arna Stevie says, I'll be using tickets mostly for the call. I lack any decent debuff calls right now as I started playing after Jack. However, it might depend on how bad Yang is to me after farming tickets, as I use Terror a lot right now. Now again, this comes back to what I was saying. Like, if you haven't picked up Yang already, or like Faris, I personally, if I were to pick one of the two, I'd probably pick Faris. Like, while some people would probably pick Yang, I would pick Faris because I value call abilities that highly. Like, I think that they really are that imperative to today's gameplay, even if you don't necessarily use, if you don't necessarily use Faris that much in your main party. Pale Raider says, absolutely gemming this banner. While not as effective in the party herself, Faris' call abilities are undeniably strong. Once 8 debuff slots become a thing, Faris will be worth her weight in gold, especially once we enter the Bluefenia Plus era. Debuff-oriented parties would normally be needed to handle the increased stats of these bosses, but with the right calls, Faris and other characters like Jack can set up fights perfectly, allowing the player to focus on dealing damage and managing AWP mechanics. This literally just says everything that I wanted to say when I was doing the Should You Pull portion of the video, where, like, as the game progresses, call abilities do become progressively more important. So to have access to them now, Faris does actually come back, though it's on Bartz's Burst Plus banner. So you're probably not going to be wanting to pull on that. So if you are going to try and get Faris LD, now is probably the best time to do that. Panic says, unfortunately my gems are being reserved for some bursts in about 3 or 4 months, so I'm going for tickets on this. I've been interested in Faris' kit ever since a 35 CP came out way back when, but she's been overshadowed by others by the time her EX Plus came out, so I never got to use her. I'm excited to get her LD and use the LD EX combo as well as her call abilities. I'm also excited to have another person with really potent debuffs, especially since Sarah was never nice to me. If you have Sarah, you are probably not going to be using Faris in your main party. They fulfill very similar roles. Yes, Faris' framed debuffs are really powerful, but she doesn't battery in the same way that Sarah does off of pretty much everything that she does. She doesn't have the HP Bravery damage plus. I mean, Sarah backed up with Faris, that's the thing. It certainly once 8 debuff slots become a thing, that's certainly a possibility. But right now, Faris is very much, you are pulling, I'm talking 80% for the call ability, 20% for other things. So that may not appeal to some players. Although apparently I'm wrong, judging by the responses to this particular poll. And then finally, Dober Dragoon says, Yaha, Fiddle DD, 150 tackets for Faris LD. If I get lucky, the Garland BT, I am Pirate. The combination attack and defense down buffs look really good. While I know there have been warnings of increased cleansing coming from JP, a good debuffer still has value. I'm not prepared to use gems though, there's just too many great characters coming up. It's pretty much where I am with it. Pretty much the same. I think that debuff cleansing is something we see a lot of anyway, and yeah, it does become it's become as prevalent as it is now. But that's why I think that having call abilities like Gabranth, like Caius, like Faris are really handy to have, because you can just go back on. It's particularly with these characters that come in, inflict the debuffs, and then they do whatever they do and then they leave. Because it means you get it off of both of their call abilities, not just the LD one. And I think that that's valuable in and of itself as well. But yes, thank you all very much for your comments, and hopefully I'll hear from you all next time as well. I value these comments and getting the feedback. I think it's great for people to see that my opinions are not just mine, but by a lot of other players as well. So thank you all very much for that. So that's going to be it for today's video. Once again, a massive congratulations to the winner of the Alexander painting giveaway. I should be sending that out very, very shortly and sending you an email just to make sure I get your address and everything so I know where to send it. And let me know in the comments below whether you'll be pulling on Faris. Apparently a lot more people are pulling on her than I thought they were originally. And let me know what you think of Faris and who you plan on taking to Dimensions End Transcendance Tier 2 as well. Thank you all very much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notification of future videos I might be making. And then that's going to be it from me. So take care, everyone. I'll see you next time. Bye now.